Brother Vincent, breaking the bread. Good to break bread with you, brother.
You as well.
And so, Brother Vincent asked me to prepare a specific meal for him, not too spicy, right?
Correct.
He said not heavy on the spices. So what I prepared for him was a dish of lemon peppered fried salmon, right? So we have lemon peppered fried salmon, curried shrimp, the famous rice and peas, right? I'm starting to be renowned for my rice and peas, right? And the red cabbage. Now, the cabbage is a little bit spicy. You have to have a kick with the cabbage. I like to have a little kick with my cabbage, you know? Okay. So,
I'm going to dance around the cabbage for a minute.
Do your thing. Okay. It's a pleasure to break bread with you, brother.
You as well.
And enjoy. Let me know what you think of it.
Will do. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, that's real curry shrimp right there.
Yeah.
I'll let the curry shrimp marinate for about 40 minutes.
Okay.
Just sitting in the curry sauce.
It shows, yeah. It's in every bite. So
in every bite?
Yeah, it really is.
You guys heard that? Curry in every bite. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome everyone back to another episode of Breaking Bread with Black Knowledge. I'm your host, Black Knowledge. To the left of me, I have my esteemed guest, Mr. Vincent Gilbert. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Mr. Gilbert.
Hello, thank you for having me. My name is Vincent Gilbert, as Ronald said, and I'm happy to be here.
So, for those who do not know, Mr. Gilbert is an attorney, right? So we put the Esquire after that. Is that correct, sir? So we have Mr. Vincent Gilbert, Esquire. Vince, can you tell me a little bit about what got you into wanting to study law, and what got you into, what was your desire? What, did something happen early in life that made you say, hey, I want to go to law school? Or did you see something that you didn't like that you thought you needed to change?
Sure. I would say the first thing that got me interested in law was around the time I was 14 or 15 or so. I had dropped out of high school. And that high school is the infamous Eastside High School from the movie Lean on Me.
Oh, Lean on Me, okay.
And in Paterson,
Joe
New
Clark.
Jersey. So after I dropped out, I got into some trouble. And dealing with the legal system, I had an opportunity to see that you don't have much say-so in how your case works. And I got a chance to see that plea bargains happen more often than trials, and in fact, they're encouraged. And so having that experience, it was, I would say, the first thing that pushed me towards law. I don't know if it was outcome determinative, but it was certainly one of the things that was an impetus for me going back to school and wanting to study law.
So you said you were from New Jersey.
Paterson.
Paterson? What was that like growing up?
I would imagine Paterson, New Jersey is like any other inner city area, territorial at times.
Okay.
You get an opportunity to see some of the ills that come along with living in an urban environment, but also certainly a sense of community as well.
Okay.
That existed.
So community was heavy when you were coming up in New Jersey.
Correct.
Did you come from a household of both parents? You had your mom and your dad at your home, or?
No. My sister and I, in case I say we, I mean my sister and I.
Okay.
My sister and I were raised by my grandparents and my father, which would be my father's parents. So we lived with them when we were growing up.
Okay. And what was that? Was that tumultuous? How was that?
It was amazing. We had some of the best grandparents. I would argue we had the best grandparents anyone could ask for.
Shout out to the grandparents.
Absolutely.
Shout out to the grandparents.
Because they
hold the family down.
They do. And they sacrificed. They never complained about the sacrifices that they made. We always felt welcomed, loved, and they encouraged us to do better. Even if we didn't do better, they still encouraged us to do better. So it was a great environment.
You said in the beginning that you had got into a little bit of legal troubles.
Correct.
So, and you're also an attorney,
Correct.
right? So how does that work? Can one get into legal troubles earlier on in life, straighten those legal troubles out, and then still study law and become an attorney?
Sure.
How does that work?
For me, I had the good fortune, I would say, of it occurring when I was a juvenile.
Okay.
So it didn't carry over, but it was something that I had to state for the ABA, the American Bar Association, as well as something that I had to put down to get into law school.
Okay.
Just because I wanted full disclosure. So
you didn't want to come back later and say, "Hey, you didn't tell us that
exactly
you had
so
these legal issues."
all of those things were very much on my applications.
So does the slate get wiped clean after a period of time because it was juvenile, or how does that work?
I'm not sure. Certain juvenile crimes, I would imagine they would still show their. It would still have some. It would resonate in some way in one's adult life, but mine's was. It wasn't like a violent crime or anything like that. So
Okay.
as a result, it wasn't something that if it did carry over, I'm unaware of it carrying over.
Okay. And you said that was one, you don't know if that was the main reason, but that was one of the reasons that propelled you to go to law school. So when you went to law school or you decided to take up law, what field of practice did you study?
I had no clue what fields even existed. I was
In law?
No, I was the most lost kid in that building.
Okay.
I didn't know what intellectual property was, which is now what I do with copyright law, but I had no clue that that was a field of law. I mean, of course I knew what criminal law was.
Okay.
But
obviously, right?
right. but
Obviously.
things other than that, I just didn't know anything about it. I just knew that college didn't seem to be enough. And I thought that I wanted something beyond college. And I thought that being a lawyer, if not being able to effectuate change in a courtroom, it would at least give me the degree that would allow me to have a modicum of presentability, if you will, in other areas where I could affect change.
So after high school, college, then after college, you said you didn't think college was enough. And but throughout high school, were there thoughts of law school in your mind? Did you say, okay, when I graduate high school, I'm going to go to college, and then when I graduate from college, I'm going to apply to law school? No. At what point did the law jump in throughout your studies in school?
Okay. Well, high school, it would be non-existent because technically, if I had to go back to high school now, it would be a freshman.
Freshman?
Yeah, it just wasn't. It was a very different time for me, and my mind was elsewhere. And so as a result, if Eastside High School were to give you my transcripts, I would definitely be in a freshman homeroom. So
that movie was crazy, bro. So just a quick sidebar. Does the movie actually capture and reflect some of the things that were actually going on in Eastside High?
Most of those things would have predated me because by the time I get there, nobody was smoking crack in the bathroom. Like the literature was out that you should probably not smoke crack. So that was probably in the 80s, which would have been before me. But in terms of it being territorial, in terms of it being
gangs, was it gangs? A lot of gangs in school when you were there?
I wouldn't say gangs more than it is. Gangs came later into Patterson. It was more of where you were from. And so as a result of where you were from, that was sort of loosely gangs, if you will, but not gangs proper, no.
So when you say where you were from, you're referring to different breakdowns of New Jersey, different
breakdowns of Patterson.
Patterson, Patterson.
Yeah, just Patterson. Different breakdowns of just Patterson. So and really it's two major high schools in Patterson. There's Eastside High School, which is for people who are considered up the hill, and then there's John F. Kennedy High School, which is for people who are down the hill in Patterson.
Up the hill from what? And down the hill from what?
It's not really a hill. For me, the dividing line between up the hill and down the hill has always been what we call the Passaic River. And so that would take you into a different side of Patterson. But if you lived on the other side of Straight Street, then you typically went to Eastside High School. If you went on the other side of it, then you went to Kennedy High School. And because I'm considered from up the hill in Patterson, I went to, okay. I would have gone to Eastside High School.
I can relate. Growing up in Brooklyn, we had an up the hill, downhill. Up the hill was considered Myrtle Ave. Down the hill was considered Park Ave. It's no literal hills,
right?
But it's just we just said that was up the hill, even if it was a slight inclination. That was a hill.
Right.
Up the hill, downhill. Okay, so after high school, after college, how did you decide on which law university that you wanted to attend and why?
I wasn't sure about coming back to New Jersey. Because when I went to college, it was Morehouse College in Atlanta. And so it wasn't so much that I fell in love with Atlanta, nor did I dislike Atlanta. I had a good time with the people that I met. But I did come back after I graduated. And that's when it was time to figure out which law school. So I initially applied to, I think it was 3. It was like Notre Dame, Duke, and then Seton Hall. And Notre Dame and Duke had me on a wait list. Seton Hall accepted me, and that was how I went to Seton Hall.
So you graduated from Seton Hall?
Correct.
And that was it? You took the bar after that, or?
Yes, after graduating from Seton Hall Law.
So after graduating from Seton Hall, you took the bar. How many times did you have to take the bar? Did you ace it the first time, or?
No, I did not. No.
Oh, so that's really a thing. That was a random question. I see that on TV with law movies. Guys say they took the bar several times before they actually passed it. It's that hard?
It's like combining everything from law school into a 2-day exam that's roughly 6 or 7 hours each day. And so it's really a battle of attrition at some point, because you are you start to become mentally fatigued. And so having 200 multiple choice questions that could vary from 17 different topics that are on the exam, and then also having an essay portion with 6 different essays that can come from any larger topic. So you could have constitutional law, you could have criminal law, you could have torts, you could have civil procedure, all of these different courses. And those are just the big names of the topics, but each of them have subcategories that also have subcategories, and you could be tested on any of those things, and you are required to know them offhand, and good luck doing so. And that's why most people have difficulty with the bar exam.
Because it's okay, so I get it. So it's basically the retention of that information and then being able to reiterate it.
Absolutely.
What? Spontaneously?
Absolutely.
There's a person actually asking questions during the exam, or how does that work? There's a booklet
that they pass. So imagine being in literally a gymnasium, or sometimes a field. If it's in the summertime, you can
outdoor
field that takes up an entire football field, and you have tables the length of the field, and you're sitting next to someone, and there's like 50 people per row, and there's about 100 rows. So you're there with a bunch of people, a bunch of personalities. Everyone's nervous, and they hand you these booklets, and they tell you, be quiet, don't look at anybody else's computer, don't, there's a number of rules that you have to have. If you have a water bottle, for example, you can't have whatever the logo is on, you have to take that off. If you bring a snack, you have to put it in a Ziploc bag that's clear, and it's
minus the label.
Yeah, it's just like random rules that are, in my opinion, all designed to just heighten the nerves that you already have going into this exam.
That's a lot. Why so many people? So, I would liken that to what? A courtroom, right? Kind of, sort of, is that they're preparing you in that manner for a bigger stage, which would be a courtroom, and having you, do things in front of groups of people and be able to perform? Is that kind of like the concept of it, or?
Court is different. I think what would prep you for court is in law school, they have these things called like moot court, and even a class that I took in the summer, what was the name of it? Persuasion and Advocacy. Okay. So things like that prepared us for what it's like. And then you actually get a chance in one of your first year classes called Legal Research and Writing. You get an opportunity to go in front of a judge and present your brief, and they pretend as though you're actually an attorney. So That's one of the best experiences.
That sounds like a good thing. I had aspirations when I was younger of attending law school. So some of the terminologies, the legal terminology that you use, I'm slightly familiar with, and it just brings back happy memories of when I was like, because I wanted to be a defense attorney. I like to argue, so I love to argue. So I wanted to be a defense attorney, and I envisioned myself standing in front of courtrooms of crowds of people and laying out a magnificent argument and winning, and
right.
that's probably not how it goes. Right?
Yeah, sometimes. I haven't had that feeling yet, but hopefully.
Because when people see law and when people think about law and lawyers and stuff like that, they think about what they see on television, right? Like some of the big cases that I've seen with notable attorneys, like what would have been the OJ trial. Like and all those attorneys, Johnny Cochran and all of those other guys, right? That's the flash of it all.
Right.
But it's not all just that flash. There's a lot of hard work that goes into it. I see you have a nice ton of books there.
Absolutely.
So that would entail a lot of reading, doesn't it?
Oh, a lot of reading. That is why law school has very little to do with intelligence and more to do with your ability to retain information.
Okay.
Because if I asked you right now what's in this book, I don't care if you have an IQ of 200, it doesn't matter because you didn't read the book. And so that's how law school is. You won't know until you've read it. And and then it's like a trick to go into law school too that I learned in my last year. Of course, it'll be my luck. I figured out my last year. But someone taught me that law school, instead of going through all the cases and reading them as I was doing and trying to highlight everything,
right,
he said, just figure out the rule and then just extract the rule. And then once you extract the rule, you just learn to apply that same rule onto a different set of facts. And so once I learned that, I did start to fast forward my reading when I went home at night. I would just scan through, pick out the rule, try to figure out what the facts were for the case just in case they call on you the next day. But the rule is the most important thing because you only get one exam in law school per class. And so that one exam will determine whether or not you pass this class. So while raising your hand and things like that are important because you don't want to be embarrassed in front of 200 other people when you say, I didn't read it, most important is that you know those rules and that you can apply those rules to a similar set of facts that will be on an exam.
Okay, that's great transition because you're talking about the application of things that you read to a different set of facts. Let's talk about after law school, right? How much of what you learned and what you studied and what you retained from law school is applicable in the courtroom, right? Your law per se that you study is what?
What I do now is copyright law.
Copyright law. So copyright law is different from criminal law. How so?
Well, for one, most copyright attorneys is civil. So usually there's no criminal penalties attached to it unless there's some sort of infringement. And even then, I've never run across an incident where there's been infringement and the penalty was criminal. It's typically some sort of civil or monetary value that's affixed to the infringement. And but criminal, of course, is something very different. It's a violation of criminal statutes, and it's typically, if not jail time, some sort of punishment attached to it.
So with the law that you do, did you have to at some point study, learn, know anything about criminal law?
Oh, yeah.
To know that whether or not you were violating anything or rules or regulations or laws?
Well, for that purpose, in terms of being an attorney, to make sure that you don't violate anything, we take a class called PR, Professional Responsibility.
Okay.
And that lays out the ethics that every attorney should know before practicing law. And in fact, you still have to do what they call a character and fitness test after the bar exam to make sure that they look into your background, make sure everything is okay. And then you're also tested on those ethical standards that you should apply throughout your career.
Okay, that's dope. That's a lot of information, a lot of retention. Because so do you bring, because you would think that you would, you could easily transition from one field of law to another because presumably it's all law, but it's definitely not. civil, tort, criminal, family.
Right.
So that's a lot of law, brother. So I commend you for taking the time to go through that journey, right? Another lawyer in the world is great as long as you using that knowledge for the betterment, right? So, and speaking of that, you're from Patterson, right?
Correct.
New Jersey. I'm originally from New York City. I'm from Brooklyn, New York, right? You mentioned the fact that at a juvenile age, you experienced some problems with the law, right? Did that involve any type of like incarceration or anything like that? Or was it just an arrest, a booking, and a release, and then how did that?
Arrest, booking, and then a short minute in what they called the youth house.
Okay.
And
Was that a county facility?
Yeah, it was for all kids in Passaic County, and then after that, release, and then it was just probation.
Okay. So the reason I asked, because I too am familiar with running afoul of the law. I spent a little bit of time in the correctional facilities of New York State, and so that for me is a great transition point into our main topic of discussion, which would be the Mr. Robert Brooks situation. Are you familiar with the Robert Brooks situation from out of upstate New York at the Marcy Correctional Facility?
I am familiar with it. I had an opportunity to view that video. Sure.
We all viewed that video. I'm definitely not going to be posting and showing that video. If people want to see that video, they can Google it. It's very Googleable. Robert Brooks, right? Marcy Correctional Facility. What were your thoughts, right? As a person who's ran afoul of the law, who got his life together and became on that side of the law, right? Where you're advocating for law. What went through your mind when you first saw that video, and why?
When I first saw that video, I would imagine that my response was consistent with the response of any relatively humane person, which was outrage. It was indignation and a profound sense of helplessness, because I had already learned of the fate of the brother, and so upon finding out that this young man died in such a brutal fashion, there was a number of emotions that I went through. But after those emotions were done, I was always taught that when you have an issue, my grandfather used to tell me that when you have a problem, the best way to be able to figure it out is to try to understand the problem. You may not come up with an answer, but at least you can try to understand the problem. And so I tried to put what happened to Mr. Brooks into a historical context.
How so?
Well, in my opinion, in order to understand what happened with Mr. Brooks, if we were to put that type of brutality into a historical context, then one would have to examine the history of blacks in this country. And so I would say, of course, white supremacy predates America and even the idea of America. But for our purposes, if we were just to restrict it to the formation of America, then we would need to start with here with this book, which is the Federalist Papers.
What's that?
And the Federalist Papers were papers and essays that became what we now call the Constitution.
Okay.
So they were written by John Jay, Alexander Hamilton, and Madison, and so they wrote it under the pseudonym of Publius. And the essay, I believe it's about 87, 88 essays in there, but the essay of most importance for this particular issue, in my opinion, would be essay 54, in which they discuss blacks and they discuss slaves. And that is where the so-called Great Compromise is made. And that Great Compromise is that anyone black is considered 3/5 a human being. And so once you start a nation by already calling someone less than human, when you can classify someone as less than and other, then the treatment that flows from that classification culminates in what we saw with Mr. Brooks.
So how do you square that up, right, with your knowledge of the Constitution, right, and the application of how the Constitution is applied, do you feel the Constitution is applied equally in this country? Or because, right, the question, I'm leading to the 13th Amendment in the Constitution, right? And we're going to get to that. But that previous question, do you think the Constitution is applied equally amongst all of the peoples within this country?
I think historically it has not been applied equally. I would say that the letters of the Constitution and the language of the Constitution is so ingratiating that if it were applied fairly, it's a magnificent document. It really is a magnificent document if it were to be applied fairly. So I would have to resonate the words of Dr. King, which is, all I ask is that you be true to what you said on paper.
And that paper would be the Constitution.
Right.
Are you familiar with the 13th Amendment of the Constitution?
I am.
And in that amendment, it talks about slavery.
Correct.
Within the United States and what would be considered legalized and not legalized forms of slavery. And in the 13th Amendment of the Constitution, it states that prisoners, after being found guilty, right, duly convicted, are considered what, slaves? So make me understand that, because I know what I read, right? I know what I read, and that was a heavy topic when I was amongst the individuals that were incarcerated. They were like, well, we don't really have rights in here as prisoners because technically the 13th Amendment of the Constitution says that we're like legally slaves, right? Can you square that up for me? Because make it make sense if you can.
That was, if I can, that was my understanding when I read the Constitution as well. The 13th Amendment of the Constitution, while it abolished slavery, the language of it abolished slavery, there was still a caveat that allowed for the conditions of slavery to be imposed upon those who were convicted of a crime. And so because of that caveat that allows for it, then certain rights that should be afforded to a citizen or to any human being, in my opinion, are then denied according to the 13th Amendment of the Constitution, though that language seems to run afoul to the stated mission of many facilities across this nation, correctional facilities.
Which is?
For purposes of uniformity, I'll just use federal prisons. Right? So when I was looking at some of their mission statements, some of their mission statements have some very promising words, and those promising words are things like to be housed in a humane environment, to ensure that prisoners have access to their necessities, to make sure that rehabilitation is a priority, et cetera, et cetera. These are some of the things that are on the BOP, the Bureau of Prisons website. But that definitely contrasts with the language of the 13th Amendment, because one says you can return to the condition of a slave and the other has a much more progressive talk. And from what I saw in that video with Mr. Brooks, it looks like the 13th Amendment has won that argument.
So you use the word conditions a lot, right, with respect to the conditions of slavery. What does that mean, essentially? Because, right, so because when I think of slavery, I think of roots and the things that I saw on TV. I wasn't there for slavery, but I've seen videos and television shows about slavery, right? And the things that I saw about slavery, I'm trying to make it comport with the 13th Amendment of the Constitution and a prisoner. So if you take a prisoner and say they can be placed in the conditions of slavery, what does that mean? Whips, chains, shackles?
Mostly from what I was able to gather from reading some of the Federalist Papers and reading some early documents surrounding the 13th Amendment, mostly it meant free labor. That was mostly what it was supposed to mean. However, because we know what the American brand of slavery looks like, it doesn't just entail free labor. It also entails a dehumanization process.
Brutality as well.
Absolutely. And so when those things are included, then we're talking about the American brand of slavery, which has proven to be extremely brutal when exacted on those that they consider to be less than or consider to be slaves.
So here's the problem, right, that I have, right, as an American citizen, because I'm an American citizen,
Absolutely.
right? We're all
As am
American
I.
citizens. We were born and raised here in America. Our heritage might be from someplace else, but I'm an American citizen. Pay taxes, things of that nature. So as an American citizen, right, to think that in this century that we live in now, the conditions that were prevalent during the times of slavery, right? You would think, right, with the modernizations of society and the advancements that we've made, how are we still there, right? How are we still at that point where people with their own eyes can watch someone get brutalized on television with their hands behind their back, right, handcuffed? Right. So this is where my faith in the criminal justice system wavers. As far as I know, there hasn't been any arrest of the 14 individuals that they fired, 13 correction officers and sergeants and one nurse, something like that. And so how does that work? Because I know as a civilian, if you, me, and a group of other people, we saw someone and we assaulted that person, right? And somebody filmed it, they would come and get us, throw us in cuffs, take us to the precincts and take us through the system. How is it that some people are afforded liberties that everyday American citizens wouldn't generally be afforded?
Well,
from a law standpoint, right? Because if the law is supposed to be equally applied, how is that possible?
Well, for those individuals that that committed that crime against Mr. Brooks, that murdered Mr. Brooks, I want to make it clear that we're not talking about all law enforcement. We're talking about criminal elements that have infiltrated law enforcement, but that is not to speak of all law enforcement, because I am aware of those who do go out and do their jobs every day, and
as am I.
Yeah, and they are disturbed by what they saw, because that type of behavior delegitimizes them and it questions their integrity. So I would tell those officers who do not engage in that type of behavior that they break ranks and try to do something that has been try to avoid doing something that has been very prevalent in not only in this nation, but in history. And that is a certain moral apathy that has to be the condition precedent in order for that type of behavior to occur. And it has not only occurred here, it's occurred across the world. If I could just bring the conversation out a little more, then
by all means do so.
There is a text known as, it's called Ordinary Men, and
written
by Christopher R. Browning. And this book details this battalion of officers who are, as the title suggests, ordinary men. And these ordinary men go from being guys who are not rabid anti-Semites or anything. They go from being normal guys to guys who are participating in mass execution of Jews, be it men, be it infants, and be it women, some even including pregnant women. And we're talking about large numbers of women and men and infants. So what this book does is it shows all of the micro decisions that are made that create the conditions for these men to turn into moral monsters, and the atmosphere that existed for these men to become moral monsters. And so one more thing in regards to that, there's another book that I have here, and it's sort of a corollary to it. And that book is called Promise Me You'll Shoot Yourself. And this is by Florian Huber. And in this book,
Promise Me You'll Shoot Yourself?
Correct.
What kind of title is that?
This book speaks to some of the things that were going on in Nazi Germany, but more importantly, it speaks to what happens to you when you become morally apathetic, when you don't care about what you see. These people, I'll give you one example of a diary, an excerpt from a diary of a teacher and his wife. And he had taught in a Nazi school, but he had never participated in any physical activities concerning harming Jews in Germany. And when he realized that war was over, and when he realized that his own apathy his own conformity had contributed to the deaths of that many people, he and his wife committed suicide. But they weren't the only ones. There was a number of Germans who committed suicide post-World War II because they became aware that their moral apathy contributed to the horrors of the Holocaust. And the same is true here. And it all started with that original lie of us being considered as 3/5 of man. But when you tell a lie, you then have to shore up that lie. And you have to shore up that lie with brutality. And in this country, it has led to, excuse me for constantly fumbling with books.
Get to it.
I have one here where something like this it's called The Child in a Chair, which is the execution of the youngest person in the United States. Young black male by the name of George Stinney, who was arrested, charged, convicted, and executed within 60-something days. The summer is longer than that.
What year was that?
This was in 1941 or 1944.
The judicial system worked that fast? I've never known the judicial system to work that fast in life or anything.
60-something days.
A man was tried, convicted, sentenced, and executed.
And we're talking about a 14-year-old who was so small that at 5'1" and 98 pounds, they had to adjust the electrodes on his head because it didn't fit him. Those chairs weren't meant for children. They were meant for adults. But that's what I mean by a certain moral apathy, is that at some point you start to get this decay, and that decay infiltrates all areas of your life, up to and including the execution of children.
So how do you square that up with the actions of the things that you said? How do you square some of those things up that you said with the actions of those officers that were actually involved? Because, in the video, they show some officers attacking, they show others watching, some laughing, right? How do you square all of that up, right? Have they lost their moral apathy, in your opinion?
Those officers who are participating are among the brutes that we've seen throughout history who have exacted that type of brutality on others. And the ones who are smiling, the ones who are not physically participating, are a part of that moral apathy that we see all the time when it comes to one's inability to respond to situations that are in front of them. And it's always momentary. It's in the moment. That's what makes you or breaks you. And
what you do in that particular moment.
In that particular moment when that crisis presents itself to you. In fact, I'm a fan of Malcolm X and Dr. King, but Dr. King spoke to what happens when you don't do what's right. He was lecturing, I forget which crowd, somewhere in Alabama, I believe. And he told them that if the opportunity to do right stands before the door of your life and you fail to do so, then if you failed to do so at 36, you could go on and live until you're 90, but you're just as dead at 36 as you would be at 90. And the cessation of breathing in your life is a belated announcement of an earlier death of the spirit, because you die when you don't do what's right. And I agree. I agree with the sentiment.
And that's based upon a specific situation when you have an opportunity to act in a moment.
Absolutely.
Choosing right or wrong, right? In that situation with Robert Brooks, there were those individuals that didn't actually partake in the assault, those that were just standing by watching,
Correct.
They would have had a duty to intervene.
Absolutely.
Even if just to stop it.
Absolutely.
Even if just to put a hand on their partner, their co-worker's shoulders and be like, hey, all right, that's enough. He's handcuffed. He's no longer a threat.
Absolutely.
That's enough. So at what point then, because it's hard, you can't get into the mindset of individuals, right? You can only just base you base your observations and your assessments and the things that you say on what they show you.
Correct.
Right? So they showed us that. So here's the thing, my question, do you believe that type of behavior that was exhibited at Marcy Correctional Facility, do you believe that was an isolated incident solely related to Marcy Correctional Facility, or is that incident more common and just not known or heard or spoken about?
I don't believe that that incident is isolated. I believe that that incident is a continuum of not just brutalities that occur in Marcy facility or in a federal facility or any facility anywhere else. It's a part of a continuum of brutality that we've seen here. If you look at some of the disturbing footage of Mr. Brooks, where he's clearly unconscious, and obviously his hands are behind his back, he doesn't pose any threat. If you look at that footage, it reminds me of one of the books that I have with me, which was called The Barn.
One of the ones that fell?
Yeah, it's one of the ones on the floor. So it's called The Barn, and it's written by a gentleman by the name of Wright Thompson, and he details the murder of Emmett Till. And we're talking about, again, a 14-year-old who was dragged out of the house. And contrary to what history has dictated, it actually happened in a barn. And that barn is owned by a dentist today. It's near Drew, Mississippi. But this young man had been tortured for hours, and he was posthumously mutilated. And eventually his remains were thrown into the Tallahatchie River. But when I think of things like that, when I think of that type of brutality, it's for me a continuum of what happens when you view me as other and I view you as other. We both are capable of very monstrous things, and I personally don't want to be involved in any of that.
Heavy conversations, brother. Heavy topics. The reason I asked you whether or not you thought that that incident with Mr. Brooks was an isolated incident, because obviously you're a civilian, you know, you're on the other side of law, you study law, you practice law, right? Coming from someone who spent a considerable amount of time in a correctional facility behind a wall, and I was able to observe the actions of not all, but some guards, right? So I know for a fact that that type of behavior is prevalent. I've known numerous individuals that were assaulted while they were incapacitated, unable to offer any resistance, killed, right? And some of those guards were very sadistic. They took pleasure in doing so, right? You could see it in their nature because they would do it right in front of you, right? And those were, to me, remnants of slavery, where they would whip the slave that ran away and cut off his feet or mutilate him in front of everyone else to instill fear. So my question is, what do we do as a society and as a people to combat that type of behavior? Because if it's as prevalent as the people that have been marching in the city, you know, I'm not in New York City currently, but I stay in tune with what's going on, and I see they've had a lot of marches and protests with respect to Mr. Brooks' death and the lack of accountability as far as no one being arrested and things of that nature. What can people do that are sitting around frustrated? Like, yo, bro, I'm tired of hearing this, right? Enough is enough. What can they do from a legal standpoint, right? What should people do? What would you encourage people to do in order to combat these types of crises?
I don't know if there's even a legal remedy for, aside from prosecuting those people who killed him. But I don't know that there's a legal remedy to prevent that type of behavior. But it doesn't mean that.
How so? With respect to, pardon me, but with respect to accountability, right? Wouldn't that be one of the first steps if those officers, right, that did that were held accountable publicly, and right? Wouldn't that be, or shouldn't that be, a deterrent? Right. So should there be like a push for the accountability, more accountability, or?
I think those officers should be prosecuted for what they did. Correct. No question about that. And but I think even if we were to put more books on more laws on the books that call for greater accountability, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I think what it boils down to is our personal interactions with people every day. So it is difficult for me to identify you as other because I know you. if I were a police officer and I were in your area, I'm not going to shoot your child. I know you, absent your child not trying to kill me,
Right.
but I'm not going to shoot your child. I know you. I can pick up a phone and call you and tell you, hey, bring your son in. Your son did X, Y, and Z, or whatever the case may be. But when we can start to establish genuine relationships with one another, that's how we move beyond that. We really don't need any more laws to call for give them 100 years in jail or whatever it may be, because there will still be that level of hatred. But if one were to be able to establish genuine connections and genuine relationships with people that are unlike yourself, and may not look like you, and ostensibly you may not have much in common with them, if you were to establish genuine relationships with them, then we can start to combat some of the ideas that we have about one another. And once we start to tear down many of the things that we think about one another, it allows for a more genuine human interaction. And with that, a lot of the negativity and brutality that we feel, it goes away, because you're more than just other to me. You're now human to me.
That makes a lot of sense, but brother, that would take a lot of work, right?
Absolutely.
A lot of work, self-work with
Absolutely.
people. With respect to one of the things that I had wrote down here that I wanted to point out to the people, right? With respect to, because I've seen some of the marches, I've seen some of the videos of the protests, and what seems to be, to me, to be a recurring theme is that there's a concept or an ideology or process being put forth that type of behavior is prevalent, right, in New York State correctional facilities, but only in New York State correctional facilities, right? So, and that's where I want to clear up that misconception. So, and right, a lot of people attribute it to like race, right? Because all of those individuals involved were white, and Mr. Brooks were black. Right. And so a lot of the videos that I saw and a lot of the protests that I saw were guys talking about their stints in prison and how racist the guards were and things of that nature. All that's true. All those are facts that I can personally attest to. But here's another thing, right? I liken that type of behavior to people who are placed in positions of power over others, and then they abuse that power. And the reason I say that is because, right, I was incarcerated on Rikers Island. And while on Rikers Island, the majority of the correctional staff on Rikers Island were black or Hispanic, right? They were whites, but they were predominantly black or Hispanic because we were within the 5 boroughs of New York City. Right. They did the same things. Just as bad as we saw in the Robert Brooks situation. I know countless situations of prisoners that were assaulted by people that look just like them, that look just like you and me. So, right, I kind of looked at it like, I think it's people be power tripping, right? I have power over you, like those like police officers that abuse their authority, right? You're going to do what I say, when I say, and how I say it without any back talk. And if not, I'm going to arrest you. But before I arrest you, I'm going to club you upside your head, right? To beat some, to beat the resistance out of you, right? Right. Do you see that? How do you square that up? Because for me, it's not just an isolated incident for the correctional facilities of New York State. That's a prevalent problem in all correctional facilities, I believe, right? Even in the county lockups, Rikers Island, because those guards, sometimes, some of them, not all of them, but some of them power trip, and they abuse you, and they'll beat you up in a heartbeat, right? Jump on you and, kill you, right? So that's, to me, I kind of looked at it like, I don't know, it's a power thing, right? And it's the people in power versus or over the people that have no power or perceive to have no power, and those with the power take advantage.
I agree. There's been multiple studies done in the areas of psychology and social sciences where people who were otherwise friends were put into these simulated situations. Sometimes they were aware, sometimes they were unaware, and they were put in situations where they had positions of power. And it really didn't.
I think I saw an experiment on television.
Yeah.
Something like that. Go ahead.
It doesn't take long for someone to become cruel, even to someone that they know.
Why cruel, though? Of all things that you can be, why cruel? Why abusive just because you have power over someone? I don't know.
I couldn't agree more. If I had the answer to that, I'd probably be a trillionaire. But I don't know what it is about positions of power. And truthfully, it has a lot to do with the type of person that you are as well. You may not be aware that you're cruel or have the potential to be cruel until given the opportunity to do so. So positions of power and positions of leadership should be limited to those who have the moral maturity and moral responsibilities that come along with it to handle those. Of course, that's idealistic.
Right. How do you even determine something like that? Right.
I don't believe there's
my
a
neck
litmus
snapped
test.
back like how that's like, man, that's right. But there should be some sort of systems in place that require that people that are going to have power over other people at least be mentally stable.
I agree.
Right? Because sometimes I don't even know if that's an instability or if that's just a character flaw or if that's just a human trait. But when when people start power tripping, they really start power tripping. And here's what bothers me. Another thing that bothers me among many things, right? It's the deception. Right? I watched someone, I think is some type of audit, Long Island audit or some other audit, some guy, he goes up to the prisons and tries to hold people accountable, some accountability.
I saw that.
And it was interesting to me because the perception that the guards gave off was that everyone's all courteous. They were super courteous to this guy. But you can tell that they wanted to just wring his neck.
Absolutely.
But they were super courteous. And it's that type of thing that's deceptively scary, because those guys that put on the Jim Carrey face and mask of everything's okay, but as soon as them doors close, they clubbing you upside your head.
Correct.
Those are the people that need to be weeded out of the system. Those type of systems, but it's going to take individuals that are within the system, their peers, to do something about it.
Correct.
Right, or to at least help put a stop. I can't even say put a stop to it because it's going to continue. I had a conversation with a friend of mine named Jose, and Jose said, "Ron, man, that stuff is never going to stop." Right, and it pained me to say that, he was right, but it sucks to believe that.
It does.
Right? It does. Here we were, two grown men having a discussion about somebody being killed, and the responses were, "Yo, bro, that's not going to stop. That's going to keep happening."
It does. I mean,
what can something needs to be done to try to quell some of that crap, bro.
Well, the good thing is that we won't leave on a pessimistic note, because in this nation especially, we have a long tradition of people who continue to fight, right? And even when frustrated, even when angry, you could look at somebody like Nina Simone, who made the song Mississippi. God damn, she was so upset when she made that song. You can look at John Coltrane, even though the song didn't have any lyrics. Alabama, he's talking about the slaughter of 4 little girls in church who were bombed, and he makes the song Alabama. But then he also turns around and makes a song and says, "I have to be a force for good." Right? Marvin Gaye gets so upset that he says, "Mercy, mercy me." And another song, Inner City Blues, he says, "It makes me want to holler and throw up both my hands." Right?
Familiar with all of those songs.
Sam Cooke tells you a change is gonna come, and then of course we have Curtis Mayfield who tells us you got to keep on pushing. So yes, it is still an uphill battle dealing with human beings, dealing with how fickle we can be, with how cruel we can be, with how kind we can be. Human beings have a trajectory that we've yet to see. But so long as I said earlier, so long as we continue to try to do what's right, and we do so in the smallest ways, we do so with our interactions with the people that we meet. It doesn't have to be anything grand, but the moment that I'm able to establish a connection, a relationship with someone whom I otherwise would not have done so with, and you are able to do the same, then we do, like the OJ said, we could create a love train.
That's a great note to leave that on. Yeah, it's an uphill battle, brother. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to come up here and try to shed some light on it from a legal standpoint. I don't know how much light we shed on it, but I definitely want to send my condolences out to the Brooks family.
As do I.
I also want to send condolences and concern out to the people living in California with those fires, right?
Absolutely.
Have you been seeing that? Have you
absolutely.
been keeping abreast of that? That's crazy,
Absolutely.
right? Not a conspiracy theorist, but that's crazy. Some of those fires look suspect. That's crazy, but condolences to all of those people out there that are affected by that. I don't know, brother. My thing is I want to be optimistic, and because society says change will eventually come, but you have to be willing to stand up for it. Absolutely. Right? And I definitely applaud those individuals. I want to give a shout out to all those individuals in New York City that are taking up the fight for Mr. Brooks, that are out there protesting, that are in the streets, that are demanding accountability from public officials, people that took office and promised to do certain things. I take my hat off to those individuals that are out there fighting. I would urge them to continue that fight. There's so much more that you and I have to discuss, brother. So, this is just one invite, right?
Absolutely.
I would love to have you on the show again. So what I didn't get to do, this is for the audience, what I didn't get to do, especially for the hoodies, I spoke to the hoodies, right? That was the first group. That was the first guest, not group. That was the first guest that I had on the podcast, right? The hoodies rap group from out of New York City, right? Upstate New York. And I had a gift for them, right? With me, breaking bread means, right? Breaking bread, right? Sitting down, having a conversation, exchanging information, ideas, eating foods and things of that nature. I didn't get a chance to give the hoodies their gifts. So E-Class, Young Papa, those hats are on the way. As soon as I get them, I'm going to get them to you guys. What do I have? Hey, I have something for Brother Vincent, who took the time to
Thank you.
make his way all the way down here. Here you go, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you can bust it open, right? You can bust it open for the crowd. Let them see what it is, one thing.
Thank you. Thank you. I will make sure I add this to my arsenal in the morning when I
when you sip your teas.
Absolutely.
Right, you're gonna remember that you broke bread with Black Knowledge on the Breaking Bread podcast.
Absolutely.
So once again, brother Vincent, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. Law, I know you're busy. I'm looking forward to speaking with you again. Hopefully we can do something like this again. And hopefully when we do this again, it will be on a more lighter note, right? When the topic shouldn't be so heavy, but I wanted to get this episode out, and you were the best person that I could think of to help me remain objective, to give me some insight from a legal perspective, so as not to go off on tangents, because that type of stuff can really rile people up and get them in their emotions, and I don't think that helps when people act off of irrationality based upon feelings and emotions rather than actual logic and sitting down and having a discussion and conversation. So again, I appreciate you, brother. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for watching. Black Knowledge Breaking Bread episode 2. It's coming to a close. Stay tuned. Episode 3, 4, 5, and 6 are upcoming. I'm going to have some great guests for you guys. I hope you guys are enjoying this content, and I look forward to continuously bringing you more content. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.